Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, and today I've just learned that Tesla delivered only 367,500 cars last year. But they've overtaken Volkswagen that delivered more than 11 million vehicles last year as the value of Tesla hits $100 billion. How does that work? Volkswagen sell 11 million cars worth less than 100 billion. Tesla sell 367,500. They're valued at over 100 billion. And I've also learned that hippos kill more people a year than sharks, tigers and lions combined. So I'm not sure why there hasn't been a Hungry Hippos movie made, but we can hope, can't we? But I digress. This is a tech show, and today I have an inspirational startup story to share with you all. Because to keep up with the digital transformation, companies of all sizes and startups are all competing for the same technical workers. And as a result, predictably, there's a major deficit of talent. But entrepreneur Kyle Campbell, a 3-time startup founder and current CEO of CTO.ai, set out to solve that problem. And CTO.ai is a platform that essentially makes it easy for startups to empower their teams through the automation of DevOps tasks and removing the need to write lines of code. And at the core of CTO.ai's mission is simply to uplevel developers by giving them the tools to perform like senior engineers and make them 10 times more efficient. And we're going to wash all that down with a fantastic story too. And I'm scared of letting out any spoilers, so I'm going to quickly beam your ears all the way to Vancouver so we can speak with Kyle Campbell from CTO.ai. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Campbell. I am the founder of CTO.ai. We are a workflow automation tool for software developers and companies to automate complex work. We help developers to streamline productivity within high-growth organizations, such as fast-growing startups. And the idea is that they can write these automations to save them time and instantly run them both in the terminal and Slack. This generates a bunch of information that the business can use to get better line of sight on the productivity and the work that's going on within the organization.
And one of the things I love doing on this tech podcast as well is learning from people's stories and what helps shape their career and shape their business. And I believe you're a 3 times startup founder now. So for all those founders listening at early stages of their first startup that could be listening anywhere in the world, I'm curious, are there any lessons that you learned that you would possibly pass down to them so they don't repeat those same mistakes?
First of all, don't try and avoid mistakes. That's inevitable.
Yeah.
My career has been one where I've learned through doing and definitely had to adapt and find solutions to challenges. One of the things that I think has been very crucial, especially as a first-time founder, is to get into the mindset of that when a problem happens, your response really should be good, because every time there's a problem, you have an opportunity. And then the second thing that I've learned over time is that it's really important to love what you do, because you're going to run into a lot of challenges along the way. It will be hard to create something new. And so you really have to love what you do and know why you're doing it. I myself have a great foundation of people around me, an amazing team that keeps me really humble and focused on what my long-term goal is. And then from there, there's just generally, some really important startup rules. Always raise more money than you need. Don't go back and try to, rethink too many decisions, because you have to move forward. And then, like I said earlier, every problem turns out that there's an opportunity associated with it. So you have to get really good at finding the silver lining in things.
And here in 2020, of course, you're now the CEO of, like you said, CTO.ai. My understanding is it's a platform that it makes it easier for startups to empower teams through the automation of DevOps tasks without writing a single line of code. But can you tell me more about your road to CTO.ai and also the kind of problems that it solves?
We have tried to really focus on the complexity that developers have to deal with in their day-to-day work. Every company is becoming a technology company, and many of them have to hire software developers. And when software developers work, they have to deal with a lot of really complicated systems. And like you said, write a lot of code. So the idea behind CTO.ai was to make it really easy for companies to adopt DevOps workflows, best practices, and essentially build tools that allow new developers who are joining the organization to observe and adopt the workflows and best practices that the developers before them have come. We have a registry of what we call shortcuts that enable any developer to start bringing sort of these ideas off the shelf to integrate with complex tools like Kubernetes or Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services. And what this does is it means the developers are able to provision the tasks that they need or execute the tasks that they need. And they spend less time trying to deal with all the nuance and complexity associated with that task. By and far, what we see is that this means that developers spend a lot more time focusing on features and sort of customer-centric value propositions. And business owners become quite happy because they're able to ship the features that their customers love and have a higher focus on productivity around features that are meaningful to their new customers.
And your core mission, I believe, is to up-level developers by giving them the tools to perform like senior engineers and actually make teams 10 times more efficient. And there's going to be a lot of startup founders sitting up and taking notice upon that. But for anyone outside of the industry, can you just tell me why that is such a big deal?
Yeah, there's a huge challenge with hiring enough technical talent in a growing startup. And so going back to one of those lessons about startups where I said always raise more money than you need, it's because generally you'll need to spend a lot of time hiring the most experienced people you can find if you're solving complex technical challenges that are sort of at the bleeding edge of your industry. So there's this idea of what people kind of joke about as the mythical 10x engineer. And the idea is it's one person who's 10 times better than everyone else. And I laugh about that a little bit because through my career, I've never actually met one of these people. They're said to be these sort of grumpy people who sit in the corner and they do 10 times more work than everyone else. And sometimes I wonder, am I grumpy or I'm not sure exactly what that means. But, the way we think about it is it's actually one person who tries to make 5 people 2 times more productive. And it's usually a more senior person on the team. And this could exist in any discipline. But for software engineers, there's definitely a perspective that you'll see in CTOs and DevOps engineers and even in engineering managers where they sort of zoom out and they look at the whole value stream of what their team's trying to create. And they find those bottlenecks and they streamline those bottlenecks. And usually it's through creating processes and tools and in this case, automation that allows those developers or their team members to execute those complicated tasks. So when we say up-level developers, what we're really saying is we're trying to create a platform for the success of software developers. And if we're going to help companies be successful at building great engineering cultures, and we expect there to need to be 40 million more developers who come online, you have to learn all this complexity. We really believe that it's the job of technical evangelists, DevOps engineers, CTOs, to streamline the experience of software development so it becomes very intuitive. And so that's what we look to do here is provide the tools, the framework in which now anyone can be that 10x engineer and help 5 other people execute on tasks that might be 2 times more complicated than they would be able to do on their own. And through that, we're able to create a platform for the success of these engineers.
And there's a lot of talk at the moment about the technical talent crisis that's facing startup teams and also businesses of all sizes. But do you have any insights you can share on that? And also, of course, why employers and startup teams should care?
Yeah, I mean, number one thing is you have to care because we've seen this through hundreds of companies, and the future of most startups, especially technology startups, are being shaped by the decisions that the technical teams are making. In most cases, these are software engineering teams. In startups, this is exponentially more true. Every startup founder that I've ever talked to recognizes that it is very hard to acquire, recruit, and motivate and enable the team that you need to continue to be successful over sort of what they call the 20-mile march or a 10-year journey in building your business. So to the extent that you can remove this complexity and create a culture of automation that enables your team to focus on innovation, which is often confused with complexity, but innovation is about new ideas and they don't necessarily have to be complex. The more you can do that, the better you will be able to create a gravitational pull and an alignment around how your teams work. This creates a ton of velocity, and it's the number one thing that I've seen help startup founders hit milestones, and then milestones roll up to funding opportunities. So really, success kind of works bottom up in a startup, but expectations are often measured top down. So when we think about the critical nature of software development in these companies, it's really about building that bottom-up momentum for teams to have and take the initiative to deliver software at a higher velocity. And when we talk about DevOps, that really is the term that we're focused on. So when we zoom out on this, it's a $300 billion a year problem according to the Stripe coefficient. That's how much developer productivity is lost every year because companies don't invest into the tools and the processes at a high enough pace to enable these teams to be successful. We also know that there's about 1 million jobs that won't be filled in the US alone in 2020. And only 1 out of every 4 jobs are being filled on average right now. So our estimation is that there'll need to be at least another 40 million developers who come online in the next 10 years to just keep up with the demand of companies who are building these engineering teams. And many of them will not have deep domain experience of the last 10, 20 years with, the advent of cloud systems. So it's important that we streamline their onboarding both into development as a career, but also our companies. And that's what's going to help us motivate and enable this talent to create the best results.
And after interviewing over 1,000 tech leaders on this Daily Tech podcast, one of the questions I get asked most of all is, out of everyone you spoke to, do they share any particular traits or experiences on their journey to success? And one thing that I have noticed amongst everyone I've spoken to is that they've encountered a problem, and rather than do nothing about it, put an angry Facebook status up, they've actually gone away and created a solution from that. And also, not only just that, it almost feels like the stars align at the perfect time to make that happen and have that conversation. And when I did a little bit of research on you, I read that after hearing firsthand from founders who were having these problems and trying to get you to be their full-time CTO, you went about creating a platform to meet what essentially you saw as an unmet need. I mean, can you share that story with people listening?
When I started this company, I had just come off an exit of my last business, which was also a developer platform. And what I really wanted to do to in my next step of my career was help other founders, other companies be successful. And I thought at the time, maybe I can angel invest into different startups. So as I went out and tried to do this, as you said, people kept trying to hire me as their CTO. And I thought it was curious that they were less interested in my money. And they said, hey, come work with us. We'll make you our CTO. We'll give you equity. And so I started scratching my head and asking myself, what is this problem that they have, which I'm not seeing? And what I came to realize was that as these companies were growing, especially as they're getting to the seed Series A stage, and we then later saw the same thing in large companies who were going through digital transformation, the process of building an engineering team is very complicated and it evolves as you go. So first you're 5 engineers and it's very simple. A technical co-founder can have a great deal of influence, and then you become 10, 25, 50. What we saw is as companies were getting to sort of 20, 25 engineers, any kind of process they may have in place or self-directed process was really starting to break down. And the result was there was a lot of challenges with momentum and delivery around timelines. And what this did is it created a relatively large risk to the milestones that the businesses were trying to achieve. And so what they were saying to me when I really asked myself and reflected on this was not, I need a CTO. What they were saying was, we need an efficient process for operating development teams. And DevOps means developer operations. So as a founder, as an entrepreneur, going back to what are the things that often founders share, there's this trait of trying to solve the problem at its core, I believe. And there's a curiosity, but also sort of a driven aspect of that I've seen in every founder that I've ever met that's been quite successful. So when I looked at that problem, the first thing I said to myself is, well, I'm unemployable, which is probably another trait that most entrepreneurs share. But then the second thing I said is, how do I solve this problem? And when I looked at that, it wasn't as interesting to me to try to solve it within one business. I've done that a lot in my career, and that's been meaningful. But if I really want to solve that problem at its core, what I really need to do is look at many different businesses, find the differences in how they are approaching these problems, and try to find sort of a universal methodology that can apply to a vast set of practices. And so that becomes a very interesting challenge, and one that I'm really passionate about as both a self-taught entrepreneur and engineer. And so that's really what sparked this in me, as I said, okay, if there really is this challenge, and then I looked at this market, which we think is about $300 billion a year, that's a really interesting problem to solve. And more importantly, if we can solve it, it can have a great deal of impact for all those software engineers who come after me. And I think that's the sort of maybe the third thing that's really important to entrepreneurs is the motivating factor is often how can you create something of value? And that value is really measured in how you can impact other people, the users of the product. So when I looked at that and I said, hey, over my career, there's been all of these people that I think of as 10x engineers who've supported me and helped me grow to have the career I have. If I can create an exponential impact that helps the next 40 million engineers, that's a meaningful thing. And that's an exciting problem that I'm willing to spend, 10, 20, 30 years on if I have to, because it's really, really core to the success that I've had. And, the last thing that I'd say is, most successful founders really figure out how to allocate their pay it forward time. And they try to do it often through their businesses, but also offline. So whether it's speaking to a founder, making an intro, or providing advice, there's different programs for mentorship. These are all really important things. And, when things are really busy, it can be hard to maintain that pay it forward time. But I think that's one thing that I've always seen out of successful founders is a need and a willingness to support those who are coming up after them and share that advice, because, as much as you can go to university and get an MBA, you really are not going to be able to learn about the deep challenges that you'll have scaling a startup or as an engineer or as a founder, unless you are able to tap into the experiences of other people.
And from that moment, you went on to enjoy fantastic success. And I also read a recent announcement that you guys have picked up a $7.5 million round of funding from Slack Fund and Tiger Global. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? And also, most importantly, what that funding means for CTO.ai? Because it's not just about the money, is it? It's what it can do for you and how it can help you move forward.
Yeah, it's never about the money. That's for sure. It's about what you can do with the money. So this is definitely a major milestone for us. As a company, over the last 18 months, we bootstrapped and we focused on getting deep with customers on these problems. We were able to generate 8 figures of revenue in that amount of time and also hire a team of 60 people without relying on outside funding. However, as we were building these products and we were realizing the opportunity that we had, we really decided that it was time to switch gears. And that's where it made a lot of sense to have a meaningful partnership with venture capital. So we went through this process, and interestingly enough, as it will happen, sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time. So I was flying back from San Francisco. Stuart Butterfield sat next to me from Slack, explained to him what we were doing. A couple of weeks later, we were talking to the Slack Fund. Wow. A few weeks later after that, Tiger Global also came in. And so what's really meaningful about this funding for us is it gives us an incredible amount of rocket fuel to take this new innovative technology into market. And a big part of what we're using that money for is to advocate on behalf of open source and developers and get involved in communities like the Kubernetes community, because a real big part of what we're trying to enable is to find those problems that developers are struggling with and streamline those. And that doesn't necessarily have to always be just a product. There's sort of a model within software development where it's important that you give back to the community. And again, it goes back to the pay it forward time. So we're spending a lot of that money and a lot of our time now on advocating for the developer community, enabling people who are big in open source to work, but then also taking and refining our product and bringing it into small companies, but then also working with larger companies as well. And that is a critical thing for us. So we're really excited to have Tiger, Slack, and all of our other investors now on board with us as we pursue our mission.
I'm curious, when Stuart Butterfield sat next to you on the plane that day, was that a completely random encounter? And the reason I say that is because, honestly, after 1,000 interviews, I've heard that many airport stories of startup founders so similar to that, where they've just sat next to the right person at the right time. And it kind of messes with my head because I don't believe in too much and think we're all in charge of our own destiny. But the more I hear these stories, it almost feels like the universe gives people a little nudge in the right direction at the right time when they need it most.
When opportunity meets preparation, I think as long as you're working hard and you're putting yourself out there, eventually the odds are that you are going to find some sort of coincidental or serendipitous opportunity. Yeah. They joke about the the elevator pitch. I call it the airplane pitch now, but it certainly was not an intentional circumstance. But
Yeah.
I was intentionally putting myself out there, intentionally putting myself in environments where I could connect with really successful people, learn from them, talk to them. But there was no way for me to predict that I was sitting next to Stuart on the plane.
Wow, crazy. And looking forward to the future then, from a tech point of view, is there anything else that really excites you about the road ahead?
We are incredibly excited about the idea of bringing accessible developer tools to startups and large companies. And we think about it every single day. We think that this is one of the most meaningful challenges that we can contribute with our skill set and our domain experience to the future of all technology, because developers are the ones who are building these technologies, whether it's consumer products or it's financial products. And our ability to influence them to build these products and spend more of their time focusing on delivering those products and those features, we think can really shape the broader market in the long run. But it starts with creating accessibility to the tools that these developers need. And we think that's a really, really important mission and something that hasn't been considered enough within the historical last 10, 20, 30 years of software development emerging on the internet. Software development has always sort of been this thing that's quite complex, and you need to spend a ton of time learning about it. And it's almost as if there's a barrier to entry that has been left by technical talent as we move forward. And we don't think about those new people we're onboarding. But I really believe that the future of work will require us all to take a more creative role in how we either contribute to technology innovation or content innovation or any kind of category. And the more that developers can create tools that enable the second order impact to consumers, to business owners, I think that is a really meaningful model. And what we're really focused on right now is that second order impact specifically for businesses. But I think there's a trickle down effect over the long term for how this work can impact consumers and the broader market. So we're really just excited about accessibility, the next 40 million developers, and figuring out how we can streamline away that 300 billion in every year that is lost in inefficient technology practices.
Well, a huge thank you for joining me today. It's a fascinating story. But before I do let you go, though, I've got to ask, you did mention the airport pitch. I'm curious, though, when you go out there and do that, are you the aisle guy or the window guy? Which is your seat of preference?
I'm usually the aisle guy, but I was the window guy on that one.
You and me both. Well, so for anyone listening that wants to find out more information, where can they find you online, and also contact your team if they are left with any questions?
Find us online at CTO.ai. We have a free community sign up to try it out. If you're a developer, you can get started accessing our registry of shortcuts in about 5 minutes. Quite easy. Our team will reach out to you right away and happy to go through an onboarding and hear about the challenges you're having. You can contact me personally at KC, like my initials for Kyle Campbell, at CTO.ai. I respond to every single person and would love to hear from people.
Well, it's an incredibly cool problem that you're solving here. And just to put that into perspective as well, I believe there's over 1 million tech jobs anticipated to be left unfilled by 2020 this year in the US alone, which actually poses a greater threat to scaling a business than actually accessing capital. So it's a great problem that you're solving, but also a fantastic story behind what you're doing. I love the human story behind that. So a big thank you for taking the time to come and join me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
What a great story. I agree with Kyle that when you work hard and put yourself out there, you're actually opening yourself up to those serendipitous happy accidents, coincidences and opportunities. But if we park all that to one side, there really does seem to be something about the universe throwing people together on planes to have the conversation at the exact right time. And like I said to Kyle, it does kind of blow my mind when I think about it. So forget the elevator pitch. As Kyle said, it's the airplane or airport pitch that seems to be where it's at in the startup community. But remember, if you have headphones on, that usually means don't talk to me. Seriously though, if you have had any similar conversations or experiences where it just kind of felt that the universe gave you a bit of a nudge in the right direction at the exact moment that you needed it, let me know, because no mystery is closed to an open mind. Maybe we could put that one to bed once and for all. So I cannot thank Carl enough for coming on and sharing his story and the fantastic work he's doing there and the problems that he's actually solving for the startup community. But as always, let me know your thoughts. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. You can get me at Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. If you want to peruse your way through over 1,000 podcast interviews, or maybe work with me on blog posts or starting your own podcast, whatever it is, let me know. But I think I've said all that there is to say for one day. I'm going to sneak out the back door now and prepare for tomorrow's podcast. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.